everyone. I bet you're super curious about what China's been up to lately, right? Well, today we're diving into something that might hit a little closer to home than you'd think. We're talking about China in the Caribbean and what that might mean for the U.S.
It's interesting. On the surface, it seems like it's just economics, but when you look closer, you see potential geopolitical stuff, too.
Right, and we've got some sources that paint a pretty wild picture here. We're seeing a huge eel commerce surge in Chinese investment in the Caribbean. Like the $3.4 billion with a B dollar investment in that Freeport container port in the Bahamas.
Yeah, and that's not just A&Y port. It's only 87 miles from Florida.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, that close. So that means they could disrupt shipping lanes, military, even become like a surveillance hub.
Wow, okay, that puts things in perspective. So it could impact like my online orders, gas prices, even national security.
Yeah, potentially.
Okay, but this isn't just like a one-time thing, is it? This is part of a bigger pattern with China in the region.
Yeah, exactly. We're seeing China using investments and loans to gain influence in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's all part of China's Belt and Road Initiative.
Oh, yeah. That massive plan to build infrastructure everywhere. I've heard about that.
Right. So it's giving them economic and political power in lots of countries.
So it's not just the Caribbean, it's China, like projecting its power globally.
Yeah.
But is that the whole story? I mean, investments are one thing, but we're also seeing all these Chinese migrants entering the U.S., and not the usual way either.
Right. That's where it gets really interesting. We're seeing this sharp rise in Chinese migrants coming in through the southern and northern borders, not visas or anything.
So like sneaking in?
Yeah, basically. And we're not talking about a few people either. This is thousands. Primarily single men, a lot of them military age, traveling in groups.
Okay, that's a little creepy, not gonna lie. And it sounds expensive, risky too. These people are paying smugglers something like $35,000 a person.
Per person.
Wow. So what's driving them to go through all this then?
Well, on the surface, it looks like economic migration, like, opportunity and stuff.
Yeah.
But with how unusual it is,
yeah,
it's hard not to wonder if there's more to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's giving me like Jason Bourne vibes. It makes you wonder what's really going on.
Exactly. It makes you think, is this part of some bigger plan tied to China's goals and all that? And the fact that they're willing to spend so much, take such big risks, it suggests, something big's motivating them, whether it's just money or something else.
So we've got this huge investment in these super important locations on one hand, and this influx of Chinese migrants, like under the radar on the other. It's all a bit, shady, isn't it? I mean, what is the U.S. doing about all this?
Well, they're not just sitting around. The U.S. is reassessing their foreign policy in the Caribbean, ramping up diplomacy, trying to strengthen ties with Caribbean nations, offer them other options besides China.
So it's like a tug of war for influence in the region.
Exactly. And they're trying to do new trade agreements with Caribbean countries, too, to boost ties and all that. But it's not just diplomacy and economics. They're also doing stuff about the migration.
Like what?
Tightening border security, more screenings, and trying to break up those smuggling rings, bringing all these people over. And they're watching everything really closely, the migration patterns, trying to understand what's going on and the risks.
Sounds like they're taking it seriously, but is it enough? Can they really compete with China? I mean, they've got a ton of money and a long-term plan, right?
That is the question. China has a clear vision for what they want to do in the Caribbean. And they're putting their money where their mouth is, The U.S. is kind of playing catch-up, trying to, reassert themselves in a place they used to run the show.
So it's like we're at a crossroads. Whatever happens now will have consequences for years, right? Not just for the Caribbean, but for the U.S. too, maybe the whole world.
Yeah, you got it. The outcome of this, it's like a chess match, could have huge consequences for trade, security, the balance of power even.
Okay, so let's recap what we've learned today. China's making big moves in the Caribbean, using investments to gain influence. This is forcing the U.S. to rethink what they're doing there. And on top of that, we've got this surge in Chinese migrants entering the U.S. in these weird ways, which is raising some red flags about security. But it sounds like we're still in the early stages of all this. What do you think?
Yeah, you summed it up well. We're in the middle of this huge geopolitical shift. And it's tough to say how it'll all play out. Things are changing all the time.
Man, it's so fascinating. It's like watching a movie unfold in real time, but we don't know the ending yet.
I like that. And the stakes are huge EE.
Yeah.
The Caribbean is becoming this focal point in the U.S.-China rivalry, and that could lead to conflict, whether it's economic, political, even military.
That's a scary thought. But is conflict the only way this can go? Is there any chance the U.S. and China could, work together in the region?
It's not impossible. Both countries want a stable and successful Caribbean. If they could find some common ground and work together on stuff like development, security, climate change, it would be good for everyone.
So there's a little hope then, amidst all the uncertainty.
I'd say so. It all comes down to what leaders do in the next few years. Will they choose to fight or to cooperate?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? And as we keep looking at this situation, we'll keep you updated and try to help you make sense of it all. But remember, we're not trying to tell you what to think here. We just want to give you the info you need to form your own opinions.
100%.
Yeah.
We're all about encouraging you to think critically and look at things from different angles.
Exactly. And that's why we want to leave you with something to think about. Based on everything we talked about, what do you think the long-term impacts of China's influence in the Caribbean will be? How will it affect the U.S., the region, and, the balance of power in the world?
So think of it like this. All this stuff with China in the Caribbean, it could actually affect you directly.
Oh, yeah. How so?
It could mess with trade routes, and that means the prices of stuff you buy every day. China's building ports and stuff, so that could change where things come from, make some things pricier, harder to find,
So my online shopping habit might take a hit.
Maybe. But it's bigger than just stuff you buy. China being there could even change your next Caribbean vacation.
Wait, really? How?
What if Chinese companies start building, resorts and tourist traps all over? It could change the whole vibe of tourism there, bring in way more Chinese tourists, maybe even shift things away from the usual spots.
That's true. I haven't thought about that. And what about the security side? We talked about those migrants coming into the U.S. That's got to be a concern.
Oh, definitely. The U.S. government is worried, especially with all those guys, military age and all coming in. Makes you wonder, is it just about jobs or is there something else going on?
That's kind of freaky. But couldn't you also say those worries are a little over the top? Not everyone coming across the border is dangerous.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. We can't jump to conclusions. Got to remember, most people are just looking for a better life. But you can see why the U.S. is being careful, especially with how many people it is and how they're doing it. They got to at least check things out, right?
Yeah. So we've got possible price hikes, changes to tourism, and security worries. What's the U.S. actually doing about this then?
Like I said, they're stepping up their diplomacy game big time, trying to buddy up with Caribbean countries, offer them other ways to develop besides taking China's money.
So it's like a popularity contest. Everyone wants to be friends.
Basically. And they're working on those new trade deals, too, to boost the economy there and give them an alternative life.
Okay, and the migrant situation, what are they doing about that?
They're doing a bunch of things. Tightening up the borders, checking everyone more carefully, and trying to stop those smugglers who are bringing people over illegally.
It sounds like a lot of work. But is it enough? I mean, can they really keep up with China, with all their money and their long-term plan?
That's the big question. China knows what they want in the Caribbean, and they're not afraid to spend to get it. The U.S. is playing catch-up, trying to, get back in control of a place they used to dominate.
It feels like we're at this tipping point, doesn't it? The choices made now will have huge consequences down the road, not just for the Caribbean, but for the U.S. and maybe even the whole world.
You're exactly right. This whole geopolitical game, the outcome could change everything. Trade, security, who has the power, it's all up in the air.
Okay, so let's do a quick recap. China's making power moves in the Caribbean, using investments to gain influence. This is making the U.S. rethink their whole strategy in the region. And to top it all off, we've got this wave of Chinese migrants coming into the U.S. through the back door, which is setting off some alarm bells about security. But it seems like this whole thing is just getting started. What do you think?
Yeah, you nailed it. We're right in the middle of this massive shift in global power, and it's impossible to know how it'll end. Things can change so fast.
It's wild. It's like, we're watching a movie in real time, except we have no clue how it ends.
I like that. And the stakes are incredibly high. The Caribbean is this, battleground for the U.S. and China, and that could easily turn into a real conflict. Economic, political, even military.
Yikes. That's a scary thought. But is conflict the only option here? Is there a nigh chance the U.S. and China could actually work together? In the Caribbean?
You never know. Both countries want the Caribbean to be stable and successful. If they could just find some common ground, work together on things like, development, security, climate change, it'd be good for everybody.
So there's a glimmer of hope then in all this craziness.
I think so. It all comes down to what decisions are made in the next few years. Will it be fight or cooperate?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And as we keep digging into this whole situation, we'll keep you updated and try to make sense of it all. But remember, we're not here to tell you what to think. It's all about giving you the info so you can form your own opinions.
Right. Yeah, for sure. We're all about thinking for yourself and looking at things from every angle.
Right. And that's why we want to leave you with a question to think about. So, with everything we talked about today, what do you think all this means long term? China in the Caribbean, how will it affect the U.S., the region itself, even like the balance of power globally?
That's a good one. It makes you think about the tough choices people in charge have to make and what could happen because of them. And it reminds us that even though the Caribbean seems far away, what happens there can affect everyone.
Yeah, it shows how important it is to understand what's going on, especially with the world changing so fast. The more we know about these things, the better we can deal with the future.
This has been a crazy deep dive. It's amazing what you can learn if you really look into something, Totally. And it proves there's always more to learn, so keep digging into this stuff. Do your own research, ask questions, and figure out what you think. What happens in the Caribbean, and maybe even the world, depends on the choices we make now.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And hey, maybe you'll find something we missed. We're always learning too. Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been awesome.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into something interesting. Until then, keep exploring and stay curious.